Now that we have all our audio and video connections connected to the TriCaster, let's go ahead and fire it up. Make sure that you have your power cord connected to the back of the TriCaster, and if you try to fire the TriCaster up with the power button in the front and you get no response, you might want to check the small switch on the back of the power supply to make sure that the power supply is also turned on. The first time you run the TriCaster, it's going to ask you if you would like to calibrate the device, and click OK. The TriCaster will calibrate itself and be ready to go. This process will take just a few minutes. Once you've calibrated the TriCaster, you won't have to do this again unless we reset the configs in some future point. Once you fire up the TriCaster and you get past the registration splash, it's going to take you directly into the TriCaster interface itself. But we're not quite ready to be here yet. I want to set the TriCaster up and talk about a couple of different modes that we can run within. So let's go to our administration screen. We do this by clicking on the small X in the upper right-hand corner and clicking on the Admin button. The administration screen allows us to do several things with our TriCaster. We're going to talk about configuring the TriCaster. Right down here in the lower right-hand corner, we can click on Configure TriCaster. This will bring up our TriCaster configuration options. Now, I'm working with a multi-standard version, which allows me to switch between PAL or NTSC. You may only have NTSC available to you here. This is where we can select our aspect ratio if we want to work in 4:3 or 16:9. And we can also run in two different modes. We can run in the 6 independent input mode, or we can run with the ISO monitor mode with only 3 inputs. And we're going to take a look at both of these different ways of running the TriCaster. We're going to start out running in the 3 input mode. And this will actually eliminate inputs 4, 5, and 6 on the TriCaster, making it a 3 input switcher. But it does have some advantages over the 6 input mode. Let's go ahead and launch the TriCaster. In the 3 input mode, we actually have ISO preview monitors for our incoming cameras. I only have 2 cameras hooked up right now, and we can see that we have camera 1, 2, and 3 displayed right on the interface. And this shows us our live incoming video inputs to those 3 inputs. We also can see whatever's coming in on our external channel. This could be an external computer source coming in through IVGA. We have our 2 DDRs. These are our 2 internal video playback devices. Our background generator and our black input for fading up and down to black. One of the things that I like about the 3 input mode is I can actually use these monitors as part of the switch. And what I mean by that is whatever is currently going out live is always going to be represented by the red box around whatever that input is. And whatever is currently on preview is represented by the green outline. Simply by left-clicking on any of these inputs right on the preview monitor a single time puts that input into preview for me. So a single click gets us into preview. A double click will actually cut that to live. So double-clicking allows us to cut right to an input, and again, single-clicking allows us to bring that input into preview. This is very handy when you start running a switch and you want to visually select what input you want to switch to next. We also have our preview and our live output monitors being shown on the interface here, and these are showing us whatever is currently on the live bus and the preview bus. The preview monitor is multifunctional, though. It has a pop-up just below it. This allows us to change the preview monitor into a waveform monitor, chrominance and luminance, or just luminance, and a vector scope. Let's take a look at the 6 input interface and see how it's a little bit different. Back in the administration panel, I'm going to go back to Configure TriCaster, and I'm going to select the 6 input mode and go ahead and relaunch the TriCaster. Here in the 6 input mode, you can see that we've gained 3 inputs on our switcher, inputs 4, 5, and 6, but we no longer have our isolated preview monitors. We can now have previews of our 2 DDRs, our external source. This would be an incoming computer via IVGA. And we have our waveform monitor vector scope actually displayed over here. Again, you've got a pop-up right here for changing the waveform monitor vector scope into its different forms. And we also have a quad view button here, and if we turn that off, it will take our waveform monitor vector scope to a full screen over there in the corner. I'm going to go ahead and switch the TriCaster back into its 3 input mode for the duration of this Get Started video. Everything that we talk about will work exactly the same between the 3-input mode and the 6-input mode. The only difference is the difference in the interface that we've already discussed. Once we have all of our video inputs connected to the front of the TriCaster, we're ready to set them up in software. We want to go to the Input Setup tab in our TriCaster, and this allows us to access our proc amp controls. Right at the top of the Input Setup tab, we have a pop-up menu which allows us to select which input we're going to be adjusting. But right next to it, we have a button called Follow Preview. Go ahead and make sure that Follow Preview is turned on so that the little blue light is actually lit up. And Follow Preview sets up the TriCaster so that whatever input we have currently on the preview bus is the input that we're going to be modifying with the controls down here in our Input Setup tab. Depending upon what sort of video input we're using, you'll have different controls available to you in the proc amp area. If we're using YC or composite, we can use brightness, contrast, hue, and saturation. If we're using a component signal, we can use the U and V offsets. We also have the ability to auto-calibrate the proc amp if we're using component, composite, or YC. This means we can turn our camera into color bar mode and it will automatically set up the camera for you. As you can see from the pop-up, we can set to 75 or 100% bars. I usually flip my camera into color bar mode and set it to 75 bars, and it sets up the proc amp for me. Now, if I'm manually adjusting the proc amp, I can of course adjust brightness, contrast, hue, and saturation. But I may make a mistake, and if I do, double-clicking on any one of these knobs resets that individual control back to its default position. If I have manipulated all of the controls and I've gotten everything way out of hand and I just want to get back to square one, you can always click on Restore Defaults and it will reset all of the controls back to their default position. We also have a termination control here. If you plan on looping the video in and out of an input, you may want to be able to terminate that input, and that can be done using the termination control here inside of your proc amp. Now we simply go to input number 2, input number 3, and we make sure that all of our inputs are set up, the proc amp is adjusted appropriately, and we're happy with all our video signals. Again, you always have the ability to use your waveform monitor and vector scope to make sure that these signals are legal, or you can use these devices to match your cameras. Now let's go ahead and take a basic tour of the interface.